All right, here we go. Let me share my screen with you guys. And we'll get going. All right. Okay. So today we're going to be looking at a new poem by Sir Walter Raleigh. It's called "The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd." So I have this poem on Classroom under the week 3. It's listed as a material. If you could open that, so just so that you can have it open, because we're going to reference it a few times. All right. So first thing is I want to hear how your first week of your Zoom classes went. If you want to add to the chat, you could. How about we'll do it like this? If your Zoom classes went like super well, I would say put a 5. A 1 is they went poorly, and then you got everything in between. So if you could just type in how you feel they went, between 1 and 5. 5 being awesome, 1 being 4. Okay. Anyone else? 4 seems to be a common. 3. All right. Why 3? If you could unmute yourself, why 3?
I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. It was just kind of like boring. And, it was just like, I don't know, just a 3.
Okay. All right. 4 seems to be common. 10. Okay. Good. So hopefully you guys don't have any concerns, but if you do, feel free to let me know and I could do my best to answer those. All right. So here's a couple things that I noticed from last week, just a couple observations. The things I noticed is that fewer people in general turned in their work this week versus last week. I want to make sure that that's not a trend that continues. So that within 3 weeks I get like 3 assignments. We want to make sure we're being consistent. So just make sure you're being as consistent as possible. Number 2, significantly more students turned in the questions than the quick write. I think my theory is that it's just because of the nature of the assignment. Questions are oftentimes easier and quicker to complete than a quick write. That said, it's only 2 assignments a week, and everything that I give you has a purpose with regards to your understanding of the work. So just make sure that you are getting these things done and you're giving a good faith effort. Number 3, many students did not properly integrate quotes into their responses, or their responses had many basic errors. So the way I want to address that, 2 things. 1, before you turn in your work, look over it. Okay. Just make sure that there's nothing obvious. Obviously, if you make a small error, no big deal. It happens to everyone. But if every third word is misspelled or there's like typing errors and stuff like that, then that gets kind of messy. Besides that, with the integrating quotes, I have on Classroom for you guys a handout that goes over ways to integrate quotes. If you feel like you struggle with that, or I've told you in the past that you struggle with that, I would say take a look at it. It'll take 5-10 minutes of your time, probably closer to 5, and it'll give you a couple tips on good ways to integrate quotes into your writing. So that's there for you. So those are three things that I noticed. Overall, we're doing well. Just I want to make sure that we're keeping it up. We're not slumping. All right. So just a reminder, your ability to receive credit for this time hinges on your participation. Okay. So obviously you guys, you 7 or 8 are here. Awesome. Good job. That's part of your participation for the week, but this does include the assignments too. So make sure that you are doing both ends in order to receive your full participation. As far as grades, those will go in this week. I just had a couple clarifying questions to ask admin about putting grades in. So once I get clarification, those will be in the actual grade book. So that'll be this week. All right. So here are the learning targets for this week. We got 2 of them. First one, I can analyze the impact of Raleigh's word choices on the meaning and tone of the poem, The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd. And number 2, I can identify an element of Marlowe's poem. For example, central ideas, structure, imagery, word choice, and explore how Raleigh represents this element in his own poem. All right, so just to break this down a bit, you guys are going to be looking at a poem that is a response to Christopher Marlowe's poem from last week. All right. They cover the same topics, they cover the same theme, well, similar themes. They just take a different spin on them. So for the first half of the week, I want you really to focus on understanding this new poem. We're going to do a lot of that here today. And then the second half, you're going to be comparing Marlowe and this new poem. All right. So just to finish up Marlowe, here are some ideas I pulled from your quick writes. These were common ideas that more than one person said. And so just take a look at these real quick. I will go through them. The first thing I saw a lot was that Marlowe argues that finer things come from nature. So that was an idea that a lot of people developed in their writing. People said he creates a feeling of springtime, and he does this with imagery, things like fields, woods, shepherds caring for sheep, things like that. People said the poem is about romantic love. They said that the poem emphasizes the speaker's relationship with his love and the natural world. And a very common one was that the poem covers the relationship between humans and nature. So all this stuff here is really good. One thing we're going to go over really quickly before we move on to the new poem, though, is the difference between a topic and a theme. Because the quick write asked you to come up with a central idea. A lot of us gave a topic and argued it as though it were a central idea. So I just want to clarify that in case you're confused. But these were some common ideas that I saw, and these are really good. So, like I said, these were good observations on the topic of Marlowe's poem, but what exactly is the theme? I want to just go over that really briefly before we continue on to the new poem, because we need to have a theme down in order to understand this new one. All right, so topic versus theme. Now, this at this point, if this was a normal class, I would ask you guys to take notes on this. So however you want to simulate that for yourself, go ahead and do it. But point is, this is very important, so make sure that you are listening. So a topic, we also call that a subject, but a topic is what a text is about. All right. You can usually state the topic in one word. It's going to be a person, a place, or a thing. So really quickly, in the chat, could you type in what you think the topic of Marlowe's poem was? One word. What is that poem about? Thank you, Dylan. All right, Kayla, thank you. Love. Okay. Does anyone have another idea besides love? That's all right. So let's work with that. So we've got this idea of love. Absolutely true. The issue is that a lot of people argued that love or some version of it is the theme. All right. So I want to really quickly clarify what I mean by theme. So when we're discussing theme or central idea, the theme is the author's message to the reader. Right? It's what the author wants to teach us. It's what the author wants us to learn. Now, theme is usually a generalization about life or about human beings. It's telling you something about the experience of being a human. All right? The experience of living in this world, living as a person. It's a universal truth. All right? So this is what you learn from the author, and it's going to be more than a one-word answer. A theme is going to be in the form of a sentence. It could be as long as you want it to be, but it has to at least be a sentence. All right? Now, the important thing to note about theme is that theme is not about a character. Okay? So it's not like, oh, the character does this, right? It's what are we learning based on what's happening in that story, in that poem. It goes above and beyond character. Okay? So I'm going to move this real quick. What I want us to look at is what is actually ignore that link right there. Go on Classroom really quickly and click on this right here, ELA 10 discussion. So you're going to click on that, and it's going to bring you here to this website called Padlet. This is where we're going to do the majority of our discussion stuff for today. Okay. The cool thing about this is this kind of serves as like a virtual corkboard, in that I could post a question, you could post your answers, but they're anonymous. So if you're the type of person who has something to share, but you don't like to, actually share it because you feel awkward or whatever it might be, this is completely anonymous. So we're going to try this out. Let me put the link in the chat to maybe make that easier. All right. So go there, have that open. So what I want you guys to do, a lot of us said that the theme of Marlowe is things like nature or love, right? Now we already talked about the fact that these aren't exactly themes; these are topics, all right? Because they're one word. The closest thing that people came to a theme in the quick writes was that Marlowe was writing about a relationship between humans and nature. Now I think that that's good. That's a good idea, but it needs a little bit of expansion in order to be a proper theme. To make this a theme, we need to answer the question, what is Marlowe teaching us about the relationship between humans and nature? What are we meant to learn? What are we meant to learn from that poem? So I posted a question on here. What is Christopher Marlowe's teaching his readers about the relationship between humans and nature and the passionate shepherd to his love? I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes. I would like if everyone who is in here can post an answer. Okay. Give me a 1-sentence theme. What is he trying to teach us about the relationship between humans and nature? All right. All right. And make sure you guys are staying in here for the sake of attendance as well. All right. So this will be up here. I'm going to mute myself for a couple minutes. Please post your answer. One more minute. All right, we got a couple, so let's go over these. And remember, this chat is going to serve as a resource for you guys during the week. So whatever you put into it is what you get out of it. All right. Oh, you got. Oh, cool. We got a couple. Awesome. If you're still writing yours, feel free to post it. No big deal. All right. So the first one, he is teaching his readers that in order to have a good life, you need some sort of nature in your life. All right. I think that works as a theme. So I would say that that's fine. All right. Is it the most eloquent theme? No. I mean, could it be more complex? Yes, it could. But I think that for a start, it's good because it's not just saying, all right, it's about nature, it's about love. It's making a statement about the relationship. That's good. He is teaching his readers how much nature is important in your life. Yes, but I would like to know more about the way in which it is important. Okay. So he's teaching his readers that nature is important, but important to what? Like to what aspect? And I think you could really I think that this is a good beginning to an idea. And I think that you could really relate it to the idea of love. So it's a good start, but needs a little work. This one here says Christopher Marlowe is teaching his readers that love and or nature is important to be a happy individual. Okay, I think that that's fine. Um, yeah, it doesn't really compare. It doesn't really draw the relationship between love and nature, but I can see the argument there. So I think that that works. Marlowe teaches his readers that the relationship with humans and nature will help them have finer things and more natural things. I think that you could probably leave it at finer things, whoever wrote this, and more natural things. I think that creates more questions than it provides answers because I'm not entirely sure what that means. Especially when the finer things that Marlowe talks about are made of natural things, right? Like the bed made out of roses, things like that. So I think that this works, but I would end it here. All right. So as you can see, oh, and then hold on, Dylan. The relationship between Marlowe about humans and nature is strong. Okay. Um, Strong in what way? I think it needs a little more context as to what you mean by strength. All right. So the point of this exercise here is that with a poem, you can have many different themes, and as long as you're addressing the topic and stating what the author's trying to say about that topic, I think you have a valid argument as far as like what the theme is. So I think that most of these are good starts. I want you to keep that in mind. Keep that relationship between nature and love in mind as we move on to this new poem. All right. So hopefully we all have this new poem up. There's gonna be a version up here too. But here's the new poem by Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, Raleigh was alive during Marlowe's life. He he would have seen Marlowe's poem. However, Marlowe would have had it published. He read it. Obviously, he thought that it needed a response. And so he wrote a poem that responds to it called The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd. So I'm going to read this to you guys. Now, as I read it, I want you to think of two things. The first thing I want you to think of is how is this similar to Christopher Marlowe's poem? All right. The second thing I want you to look for is anything that you need clarification on. Today is all about making sure we understand what this poem is about. Okay. Your understanding of this poem is going to help you when it comes to your work this week. So if there's a word you don't know, or a question you have, I want you to put it in the chat so that when I'm done reading, I can pull it up and we can go over it. Okay. All right. So this is called The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd. And it reads, if all the world in love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue, these pretty pleasures might me move to live with thee and be thy love. Time drives the flocks from field to fold, when rivers rage and rocks grow cold, and Philomel becometh dumb, the rest complains of cares to come. The flowers do fade in wanton fields, to wayward winter reckoning yields. A honey tongue, a heart of gall, is fancy's spring, but sorrow's fall. Thy gowns, thy shoes, thy beds of roses, thy cap, thy kirtle, and thy posies, soon break, soon wither, soon forgotten, in folly ripe, in reason rotten. Thy belt of straw and ivy buds, the coral clasps and amber studs, all these in me no means can move, to come to thee and be thy Louvre. But could youth last, and love still breed, had joys no date, nor age no need, then these delights my mind might move, to live with thee and be thy Louvre. So that's the poem. So anything that you have questions about, I want you to take a moment, look through it again. If you have questions, or if there's any words or phrases that you need clarification on, put it into the chat. I will give you a minute to do so, and then I will go over them. Okay. All right. So we understand everything. The question is there anything in this poem that you need clarification on? Any words, any phrases, anything like that? If you would rather ask like verbally, that's fine. So do we know what a nymph is? Do you know what Philomel is? All right, so we're gonna go over those two things really quickly because that's what the previous class had identified as needing clarification. Okay. All right, so a nymph is a woman. The implication here is that she's attractive. All right, so you could think of it as an attractive woman. And Philomel, that was one of the things that the previous class had asked about. Philomel is a figure in Greek mythology. This figure, she turns into a nightingale, which is a bird. And a nightingale symbolizes the purity of nature. It symbolizes virtue and goodness. All right. So that is an illusion here that I want you guys to consider as we continue. And I want you to pay attention to. All right. Let's see here. All right. So I've got a couple questions that we're going to use the Padlet for that I want to go over. All right. So here's this first one. I'm going to copy it into the Padlet. All right. And the question is, from whose point of view is the poem being told? And who is the intended audience? So I want you to take a minute and put your answer into the Padlet. And if you could tell me how you know, that would be even better. Okay. So take a moment. Whose point of view is the poem being told? Put that into the Padlet. And I'll keep the poem up here for you. So whose point of view is the poem being told from? All right. So Dylan said that it's from Marlowe's point of view. So the poem's being written from Marlowe's point of view. Dylan, if you can unmute yourself and explain to me what your thought process is.
Man, I just try to get my grade up. I
Okay.
just trying to
Right.
you know how I do in real life, trying to get my grades. You know,
Right. But
man.
okay. So hold on. Pause. So what made you say that though?
I really don't know for real, because he gave more detail and he know about the humans and all that stuff. So, from his point of view, he probably know more like details than other people in the story. Or
So
you know,
keep in mind though. So if you say that's from Harlow's point of view, then that implies that Marlowe's like a character in this poem, or like a
something like that.
figure
Yeah,
in the poem.
something like that.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other ideas? There's more of you on here. Keep in mind the what you put into this is what you're going to get out of this. Okay. So I would like a little more participation, ideally. So, yep. A hint is that you really only need to look at the title. So whose point of view is this? Okay. Kayla, thank you. So the woman's point of view, or the nymph, right? Good. So we were introduced to this person in Marlowe's poem, right? She's implied. It's the love. So now we get a response, presumably from that same person. Good. And now who is the audience? Who is being responded to in the world of the poem? So again, you really only need to look at the title. So who is the nymph or the woman responding to? Feel free to add your thought to the chat. So we know it's from to Marlo. Okay. So not to Marlo, but to the character that Marlo has created, the shepherd. And Toriana, we're just talking about the point of view of this poem. All right, so we've got that it's from the woman's point of view. She's replying to the shepherd, who is the main figure from Harlow's poem. So this creates a relationship between those two texts, right? What is that relationship, do you think? What's the connection between this poem and Harlow's poem after having heard it? If you'd like to say it out loud, you can. You could type it, whatever you want to do. But what is the connection between this new poem and what we saw with Christopher Harlow? You guys are making this like pulling teeth. Again, at the end, I will talk with you about your grade and all that stuff. So you'll stick around at the end.
Yes, sir. You know the vibe.
Okay, so what is the relationship, you guys, between this poem and the last one? How are they similar? How are they unique from each other? All right, they both talk about love. Good. Are they talking about love in the same way?
I know they both talk about nature, though. It seems like.
Okay, good. They're both talking about nature. Now, what approach does this poem take that's different from Marlowe's? They're talking about pleasures. Good. So we know that both of these poems are talking about three of these same things. We got pleasures, we got nature, we've got love. Now, what's different in the way that this poem is approaching it compared to Marlowe's?
Wait, can you say that one more time?
So far what we've all said is true, but what's different about the way that this author is approaching that same topic? Now, Kayla, you say it's more materialistic. What does that mean? Like, what do you mean by this one being? Now, are you saying that this one's more materialistic, the last one, or what?
No, I'm saying this one's more materialistic.
Okay, why?
I don't know. It just seemed like in this one, it's more about like the pleasures.
Okay,
And the
so
other one, it was more about love.
okay, so this one there's more emphasis on the actual pleasures. Is there a quote in particular that tells you this?
These pretty pleasures might move me to live with thee and be thy love.
Okay, so these pretty pleasures might me move to live with thee and be thy loof. So this one is putting a lot more emphasis on the pleasure aspect. Good, and the previous one you said was more about the nature. Is that what she said?
Yeah.
Okay, so Marlowe's poem is a lot more focused on nature, how beautiful it is. Because keep in mind, Marlowe's poem was a pastoral poem, right? And last week we had said that a pastoral poem, its goal is to really glorify nature and to really like live in that world and say, okay, the country life is awesome. This is the best way to live, stuff like that. His poem, while it has a lot in common with it, it kind of twists it, right? It takes a pastoral poem and it does the exact opposite. It's saying that maybe nature isn't that great, right? Let's look at this one. The poem begins with if, all right? How does this choice to start the poem with if, how does it impact the meaning and the tone? So I will reread this stanza, and I want you guys to think, why does the author begin this with if? If all the world and love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue, these pretty pleasures might me move to live with thee and be thy love. Why does the author start with if? What type of tone does that create? All right, Kayla, it's like saying if the world was like that in a more hypothetical way. Okay, so it's hypothetical. Good. It's saying if the world were a certain way. Good. So it's saying if all the world and love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue. So if the shepherd were telling the truth, these pretty pleasures might me move. So might make the person want to be with the shepherd. So in stanza 1, the nymph is saying if the world was in fact like this, then she would be with him. So it is very hypothetical. How else would you describe the tone? If you're saying, if what you're saying is true, then I can be with you. What type of tone is that? And remember, like a tone is like a one word description of how, of the feeling behind a line. What do you think the tone is? So someone give me a tone word to describe stanza 1. So I won't tell you what I think, but what your peers in the previous class said was doubtful. They said that it's a doubtful tone. They said that it's a skeptical tone. And I think that those are two emotions that are important to think about in the context of this poem, because this poem is all about doubt. We are we got curious. Okay, good. A curious tone. All right. So we got curiosity, we got doubt, we got hypothetical, we've got skeptical. So what do you think this poem is being skeptical about? Like what is it kind of arguing against? If you could put it in like a sentence. What is this poem arguing against? All right, let's see if we move on to stanza 2, it might make it more clear. So stanza 2 is talking about time. The nymph says, time drives the flocks, so like sheep, right, from field to fold, when rivers rage and rocks grow cold. And Philomel becometh dumb, the rest complains of cares to come. So my next question to you is, how does the nymph describe time? What effect does this time have on the tone of stanza 2? So how is time being used here? What does time do? Not a trick question. What does time do? So what effect does time have on a person, on a place?
Make it sometimes not be enough time or something like that.
Okay. So let's say that we put you in a room, right? And 20 years pass. What's going to happen to you in those 20 years?
You're gonna get older.
Okay. So you're going to change, right? So time in this poem is a force that's going to cause change. Now, our question is to figure out whether that's a positive change or a negative change. Okay. So in stanza 2, they're saying time drives the flocks from field to fold. So it's driving the flocks away from the fields. The rocks are going to grow cold. The rivers are going to rage. Does this sound like a positive change, or does this sound like a negative change? Philomel is becoming dumb. Philomel, again, symbolizes the purity of nature. So the purity of nature is becoming dumb. Does this sound positive or negative? You could just type in positive or negative. Which one do you think it is? Or you can say it. Positive or negative change? Negative. All right, Stormy, thank you. Good. And you can see that in other examples. So if you look here, thy gowns, thy shoes, thy beds of roses, thy cap, thy kirtle, and thy posies soon break, soon wither, soon forgotten, right? So things are breaking with time. Things are falling apart with time. They're being forgotten with time. So there's another one in here too. Flowers do fade. Haunted fields. We've got the springtime that Marlowe was describing is going to turn into a wayward winter. So we've got a lot of negative changes here that are resulting from time. So whereas Marlowe's poem was saying nature's great, it's going to provide you with all of these things, and all of these things are going to make you love me. The nymph here is saying, well, if that were true, it would be good, but it isn't true, and here's why. And she's giving all of these reasons, all of these ways in which nature can be a negative force, a force for something bad. So the tone here is completely different from Harlow, like complete opposite. Okay. Marlowe's piece was a very positive one. It was very uplifting. It was very, there's just a word for it. I just can't think of it. Hopeful is how people described it. Well, as class, hopeful. This poem, on the other hand, is not hopeful. It's very pessimistic, was one of the words that they used. It's a very pessimistic work. It's very negative. All right, we're running low on time, so we're going to speed this up a bit. We talked about what it does to the pretty pleasures. That's good. Rally's use of figurative language. We could talk about that. Okay, let's look at this one. What relationship does the nymph describe between youth and love in the final stanza? So I'm going to read this to you. Now, again, the sooner, the more active you guys are in answering this question, the sooner we can end, okay? All right, so our last stanza. But could youth last and love still breed, had joys no date, nor age no need, then these delights my mind might move, to live with thee and be thy Louvre. So what I'm really looking for is, what is the conclusion that is being drawn here? What is the relationship? I'm going to type it here. Between youth and, let me see, what was that other part? Youth and love. So what is the relationship between youth and love in the final stanza? You can either tell me verbally or type it in. I'll give you like a minute or two to think. The last one. So stanza 6. All right, Kayla, you said, I think it's saying when you're younger, your love is more vibrant. And as you get older, it starts to die down. Okay, that's good. I could definitely see that there, especially in those first 2 lines. And could youth last? So if youth could last forever and love still breed, if love could continue on into old age, had joys no date, if happy things lasted forever, or nor age no need. So if when you get older, you don't need extra care, then maybe these things would impress me. They might move my mind and I will be with you. So Kayla, you're absolutely right. That when you are younger, love is more vibrant, right? And that is what Raleigh is trying to point out. That Marlowe's poem might be true if you're young, or if you live a life where everything is very positive. But for people who are older, then it might not be so true. Because as you get older, you get more pessimistic, right? Things don't seem as happy as they used to. You don't feel love as strongly as you did. So as you work with this poem this week, all right, I want you to really think about the comparison, because one of the assignments that you guys have for this week is to compare this with Harlow's poem. Now, we did a lot of that here, right? And if you look at the chat, because the last class used this more, if you look at that classes, which I'll post online, there's a lot of conversation there about how the 2 poems compare. So that's really what we're looking forward to. We talked about tone. all that stuff. So that's good. All right. So let's debrief real quick. Having discussed the poem, how does it compare with Marlowe's? What is similar? What is different? We kind of all already touched on this, but really quickly, I need at least three of you to type in what your thoughts are. What's one thing that is similar between this poem and Marlowe's, and what's one thing that is not the same? And then after that, I'll go over what we're doing this week, and then we'll be all set. But stay on, because I need to make sure I have the attendance in. So I need three answers to this right here. What is one way that these poems are similar? One way that they're unique? I need one more person's answer. All right, so they both talk about love. They're both about nature, but one is more passionate. Obviously, that's going to be Marlowe's, isn't as materialistic as the other. Poems are similar because they are both talking about love, and one poem is more focused on materialistic things. All right, good. Also keep in mind the tones of them aren't exactly the same. The tone of the second one, a lot more pessimistic. The tone of Marlowe's poem, a lot more hopeful. All right, so those are all things I want you to consider. Please make sure that you look at this. This is the class discussion from the previous class. This went a little better than with you guys. You guys were a little quieter, which is okay, but you want to make sure you participate. So look at this. They had a lot of good answers. We should get some extra credit for that. Oh, maybe. It would have been nice though if we had done this a little better. All right, that's all right. We'll get there. You guys are a quieter group in general, except for Ayana. All right. All right, let's wrap this up. So here's your checklist for this week. So please read through the materials on Classroom. I posted the tone word handout and the integrating quotes handout to help you guys. The tone words, that's the same thing that I gave you guys physically in class. So if you have that, yes, I'll answer your question in a moment. If you have that, you can use that. The integrating quotes handout, a lot of us are really not doing what we should do as far as using quotes in our quick writes and things like that. Check out that handout. Even if you don't think that you need help with it, it might give you a tip that you would find helpful. It'll take like 5 minutes out of your day. Assignment 4 is a discussion board. That discussion board is going to ask you about the meaning and tone of the poem. So a lot of what we talked about here, I asked that you give me an original response and then 2 replies. So that might require you to check in later in the week as more people answer. Assignment 5 is a compare contrast. So it's not like a quick writer or anything like that. You have some questions and you have a graphic organizer. Okay. The idea is to just understand how these 2 poems are related to each other, how they interact with each other. All right. Anyone have any questions? Let me really quickly take a screenshot of this.
Okay, excuse me, Mr. Cutchy.
Hold on. And let me just turn off the recording.